The cold of the pawn shop's glass counter leached into David's forearms, a chill that had nothing to do with the overworked air conditioner sputtering in the corner. Before him, nestled in a worn velvet box, lay the last ghost of a former life. It wasn't just a medal. It was the Distinguished Service Cross, a testament to a moment of impossible choice in a sun-scorched valley halfway around the world. It was the weight of his brother's trust, the quiet nod of a commanding officer who knew what he'd truly done, the silent promise he'd made to a life he could no longer lead. And now, it was worth $347. Enough for rent, for the overdue electric bill, and for a week's worth of Lily's favorite macaroni and cheese. His daughter's bright, innocent smile was the only currency that mattered anymore. The man behind the counter, a creature of cynical appraisals and practiced apathy, slid the cash under the security grill. The crisp bills felt like ash in David's hand. He scooped them up, leaving the medal and its silent history behind. As he walked out, the little bell on the door chimed a pathetic farewell. He didn't look back. Looking back was a luxury for men who weren't haunted. For men whose past wasn't a locked room they carried inside them. For men who hadn't traded valor for groceries. The city air, thick with exhaust and indifference, hit him like a physical blow. He was just another face in the crowd, another man with weary shoulders and eyes that had seen too much. The world saw a failure, a down-on-his-luck veteran struggling to keep his head above water. And in that moment, walking away from the last shred of his honor, David almost believed it himself. A week later, the memory of the pawn shop was a dull ache beneath the surface, overshadowed by the immediate need to earn the next dollar. The city was electric with a manufactured patriotism, a sea of flags and banners for the president's visit. David stood behind a stainless steel cart, the smell of sizzling hot dogs clinging to his clothes. The sign, hand-painted by Lily, read, "Dave's Dogs, the best in town," in cheerful, crooked letters. It was a low-paying, soul-grinding job, but it was honest work, and it put him right in the middle of Lafayette Square, directly across from the White House. He watched the motorcade arrive, a serpent of black steel and flashing lights. Secret Service agents, their bodies coiled springs of latent energy, fanned out, creating a perimeter of invisible, lethal force. They moved with a predatory grace that David recognized. He saw the subtle scans, the way their eyes never rested, the slight cant of their heads as they listened to their earpieces. He also saw the holes. He saw them not with judgment, but with the dispassionate clarity of a master craftsman observing an apprentice's work. They were good. Very good. But they were looking for the obvious threats: the bulky jacket in summer, the twitchy man avoiding eye contact, the abandoned package. They were trained to see the lion, not the viper in the grass. He saw the blind spots in their overlapping fields of fire, the way the crowd's density created unpredictable funnels, the rooftop positions that were compromised by the glare off a neighboring glass building. These thoughts weren't conscious. They were echoes, muscle memory from a mind forged in the crucible of absolute vigilance. A life where a single miscalculation meant a name carved in marble. A shadow fell over his cart. "Hey, hot dog guy!" The voice was sharp, dismissive. David looked up into the face of a Secret Service agent. He was young, fit, with the kind of arrogant confidence that came from being the smartest, strongest man in every room he'd ever entered. The agent's name tag read Thorne. "You're too close to the primary cordon. Move the cart back 20 feet. Now." Thorne didn't wait for a reply, already turning his attention to a woman with a baby stroller. There was no please, no thank you. David was part of the landscape, a piece of civilian furniture to be rearranged for the convenience of the powerful. "Yes, sir," David said quietly, his voice swallowed by the noise of the crowd. He began to wheel the heavy, cumbersome cart back, its sticky wheels fighting him on the uneven pavement. As he moved, another agent passed by, murmuring to Thorne, "You get the old-timer squared away?" Thorne grunted. "Yeah." Probably spent his morning polishing his VFW medals. "Move it along, Grandpa," he called over his shoulder, a smirk playing on his lips. The casual cruelty of the remark was a tiny, sharp stone in David's shoe. He felt a familiar, hot flush of anger, but he smothered it. Humility was a shield he had learned to wear. Anger was a fire that only burned the one who held it. He repositioned his cart, now partially obscured by a large oak tree, his view of the presidential pavilion slightly diminished. He settled in, wiped down his counter, and went back to work, a ghost at the feast, invisible to the very men whose profession he had once perfected. The president's speech was a predictable mix of soaring rhetoric and policy points. The crowd applauded at the right moments. But David wasn't watching the president. His attention, drawn by an instinct he couldn't suppress, was on the periphery. He was watching the watchers. And he was watching the president's 10-year-old daughter, Anna, who, bored with the speech, was chasing a butterfly near a row of manicured hedges. A female agent was assigned to her, but her attention was split, one eye on the child, the other scanning the crowd for threats to her primary protectee on the stage. It was a classic tactical error. Dividing focus guarantees failure in both tasks. David's gaze drifted, a slow, methodical sweep. It was a pattern ingrained in him, the Z-scan, covering near, middle, and far distances, left to right. He wasn't looking for anything in particular. He was simply aware. He catalogued the press corps, the tourists, the stern-faced agents on the rooftops with their long-range optics. His eyes flickered over a group of children playing near a fountain. One of them had a remote-controlled car, a garish, bright red toy that zipped erratically across the stone plaza. Normal. Everything was normal. And yet, a cold knot was tightening in his gut. A low-frequency hum of wrongness that his body recognized before his mind could name it. He had felt it before. He had felt it in a crowded marketplace in Kandahar, seconds before the world dissolved into fire and shrapnel. His gaze returned to the remote-controlled car. It had stopped. It wasn't near the children anymore. It was half hidden behind the base of a statue, its red plastic shell pointed directly at the spot where Anna was now crouched, examining a flower. The distance was roughly 40 yards. The angle was perfect. No one was looking at it. It was just a child's forgotten toy. Then he saw it. A flicker. A tiny, almost imperceptible shift in the light. A lens. Tucked inside the toy car's hollowed-out headlight socket was a small, dark circle of polished glass. David's blood went cold. His mind, a supercomputer of threat assessment, ran the calculations in a nanosecond. It wasn't a bomb. A bomb was loud, messy, and designed to create panic. This was something else. Something precise. Silent. Deniable. A compressed gas launcher. A flechette, maybe ceramic or tungsten. Something small enough to be dismissed as a tragic accident, a piece of debris thrown from a lawnmower, a freak event. It would be untraceable, a ghost weapon. It was aimed directly at the one target whose death would emotionally cripple the leader of the free world. The agent with Anna was looking toward the stage, her attention drawn by a sudden burst of applause. Thorne and his team were a rigid wall of muscle, their backs to the real threat. They were all looking the wrong way. Time seemed to warp, stretching like warm taffy. David saw the scenario play out in his head, the silent puff of air, the tiny projectile moving faster than a rifle bullet, the child falling, the delayed chaos, the catastrophic failure that no one would ever understand. He had no way to communicate the threat. A shout would be misinterpreted, earning him a face full of pavement from the nearest agent. He was too far to physically intervene. He was a hot dog vendor. He was nothing. His mind raced past panic and landed on the cold, hard certainty of action. His entire world narrowed to a handful of variables: the projectile's likely velocity, the slight crosswind from the west, the distance, and the tools he had at his disposal. A pair of heavy, stainless steel tongs. It was a problem of physics. A question of vectors and kinetic energy. He couldn't stop the projectile. But he could change its path. His movements were fluid, economical, born of 1,000 hours of repetitive drilling in a place no one knew existed. There was no conscious thought, only a flow state where past and present merged. His left hand, as if fumbling, knocked a stack of napkins to the ground. As he bent to retrieve them, his body shielded his right hand from view. In that split second, his right hand did three things simultaneously. First, his fingers formed a near imperceptible shape against his thigh, a three-finger press, followed by a slight outward sweep of the thumb. It was Protocol Jericho. A signal that meant covert threat neutralized by unconventional means. Stand by. Do not engage. It was a message sent to a ghost, a signal for a spotter on an overwatched position that didn't exist here, a reflex from a life that was supposed to be buried. Second, his eyes locked onto the target, not the projectile, but the point in space where he needed to create an interception. His brain, a master of intuitive geometry, calculated the arc. Third, his wrist snapped forward. He didn't throw the tongs. He released them. It was a controlled drop, a flick of stored energy that sent the 18-inch steel tongs spinning through the air on a precise, horizontal axis. They looked like they'd simply slipped from his grasp, a clumsy accident. A few people nearby glanced over, then looked away, uninterested in the minor mishap of a street vendor. The tongs spun, a silver blur against the green grass. They sailed not toward the toy car, but toward a cast-iron park bench that sat between the car and the president's daughter. The slow-motion ballet continued in David's mind. The tongs completed 1.5 rotations before the curved end struck the bench leg at a precise 40-degree angle. The sound was a dull clank, barely audible over the murmur of the crowd. The impact was perfect. The tongs didn't just bounce, they ricocheted. The kinetic energy was transferred, altering their trajectory instantly. They spun sideways, now a whirling metal shield, for less than 1/10 of a second, directly into the path of the incoming threat. At that exact moment, a faint sound, like a sigh, emanated from the toy car. The projectile, a needle-thin tungsten flechette, cleared the launcher at over 2,000 feet per second. It was invisible to the naked eye. But it was not invisible to physics. It slammed into the spinning tongs with a sharp tink, a sound like a pebble hitting a tin roof. The sound was utterly lost in the ambient noise. The flechette, its trajectory ruined, was deflected downward, tumbling end over end into the soft soil of a flower bed, burying itself 3 inches deep, 5 feet to the left of where Anna was happily humming to herself. The tongs clattered harmlessly to the ground. The entire event, from David's drop to the neutralization, had taken 12 seconds. No one saw a thing. Anna stood up, chased her butterfly again, and the world kept spinning, blissfully unaware of the thread by which it had just been hanging. David calmly picked up his tongs, wiped them on his apron, and placed a hot dog in a bun for a waiting customer. His heart was hammering against his ribs, but his hands were perfectly steady. The event concluded without further incident. The president waved, the family was whisked away, and the crowd began to disperse. Agent Thorne was feeling smug. A perfect day. A textbook operation. He was walking the perimeter with a junior agent, doing a final sweep. "See, rookie?" Thorne said, clapping the younger man on the back. "Stay sharp, trust your training, and it all goes smooth as silk." It was then that the junior agent, tasked with the menial job of checking the flower beds, knelt. "Sir? You might want to see this." Thorne strode over, annoyed at the interruption. The junior agent pointed at a small, perfectly round hole in the dirt. Using a pen, he carefully excavated the object. It was a 2-inch flechette, its tip coated in a clear, viscous gel. A contact neurotoxin. Thorne's blood ran cold. The smug satisfaction evaporated, replaced by a sickening, professional dread. This wasn't just a bullet. This was an assassination weapon of terrifying sophistication. And it had gotten past them. All of them. The next hour was a blur of contained panic. The area was cordoned off. Forensics descended. The toy car was found and bagged. The initial report was stark. A covert, high-tech assassination attempt on the president's daughter had been initiated and had, for reasons unknown, failed. Thorne felt his career, his reputation, his entire world crumbling. Failure wasn't an option in the Secret Service. It was a professional death sentence. "I want every frame of every camera that had eyes on this quadrant," He snarled into his radio. I want it analyzed. I want to know who, what, when, where, and why. I want to know how we got this lucky. Now. In a sterile, windowless room deep within the Hoover building, a video analyst named Chen stared at his screen, his eyes burning. He had synced feeds from 6 different cameras, creating a 3D composite of the critical 12 seconds. It makes no sense, sir, he said to Thorne, who loomed over his shoulder, his face a mask of grim frustration. The projectile path is clear. It should have been a clean hit. But something deflected it. What something? Thorne demanded. The wind? A bird? Negative, sir. The trajectory deviation was too sharp, too immediate. It was a hard intercept. Chen isolated the footage from a tourist's smartphone, enhancing the grainy video. He played it back at 1/100th of its normal speed. There. Right there, on the screen, they saw it. The hot dog vendor. The dropped tongs. It was an accident. Thorne scoffed. The guy's a clumsy oaf. I saw him earlier. Just dumb luck with respect, sir, Chen said, his voice quiet but firm. There's no such thing as dumb luck in physics. He continued to work, his fingers flying across the keyboard, isolating vectors, running simulations. He zoomed in on the vendor's body just before the tongs were released. He filtered out the visual noise, sharpened the contrast. Wait a minute, he murmured. He isolated David's right hand, pressed against his leg. What is that? A muscle spasm? He magnified the image until it was a mosaic of pixels. And there it was. Unmistakable. A 3-finger press. A thumb sweep. It wasn't a spasm. It was a signal. Deliberate. Precise. Run that signal, Thorne ordered, his voice suddenly tight. Cross-reference it. MI6, Mossad, SVR, GRU. Run it against everything we have. Chen typed in the query. The system churned for a moment. The result came back, and no match found. It's nothing, Thorne said, a wave of relief washing over him. It was just a weird twitch. Run it against the Onyx archive, Chen said, almost to himself. Thorne froze. The Onyx archive wasn't a database. It was a crypt. It held the sealed, apocryphal records of units and operations that officially never existed. Accessing it without cause was a career-ending move. Do it, Thorne whispered. Chen typed in his credentials, then Thorne's, then a third authorization code that required a call to the director's office. The system processed the request. The screen went black for a moment, then a single line of stark white text appeared. Protocol Jericho. Unit 734. Ghost Detachment. Status, defunct, officially. Acknowledgement requires Level 1 clearance, signed by the director. The room fell utterly silent. Chen looked from the screen to Thorne. The agent's face was pale, his arrogant confidence stripped away, replaced by a look of profound, horrified awe. They hadn't been saved by luck. They had been saved by a legend. A ghost who sold hot dogs. The next evening, a discreet black sedan, the kind that blends into traffic by being aggressively unremarkable, pulled up to David's rundown apartment building. The man who stepped out was not Agent Thorne. He was older, with silver hair and a quiet authority that needed no badge or weapon to announce itself. It was Director Marcus Vance, the head of the United States Secret Service. David opened his door to a firm but gentle knock. He saw Vance standing there and felt no surprise, only a weary resignation. He assumed he was in some kind of trouble. Mr. Miller, Vance said, his voice calm and respectful. My name is Marcus Vance. May I come in? David simply nodded, stepping aside. The apartment was small and sparse, but immaculately clean. A crayon drawing of a smiling sun and a little girl was taped to the refrigerator. Vance's eyes took it all in, not with judgment, but with understanding. We know who you are, David, Vance began, his tone devoid of accusation. We know about Unit 734. I was a junior field agent in Langley when the first whispers of Protocol Jericho started. We thought it was a myth. A boogeyman story we told rookies to keep them sharp. He paused, his gaze intense. Yesterday, you saved the life of the president's daughter. You did it from 40 yards away with a pair of barbecue tongs, and you did it so perfectly that no one even knew it happened. You did our job for us, and you did it better. He reached into his coat and pulled out a thick envelope and a small, square velvet box. This is a discretionary fund, he said, placing the envelope on the cheap kitchen table. It should help with the immediate pressures. Consider it a down payment on a debt we can never fully repay. He then slid the velvet box across the table. David opened it. Inside, polished to a brilliant shine, lay his Distinguished Service Cross. A single tear traced a path through the weariness on David's cheek. How? He whispered. The pawn shop owner is a patriot, Vance said with a small smile. And the nation has a long memory for its true heroes, especially the ones who believe they've been forgotten. He leaned forward. We have gaps in our protocols, David. We're looking for lions when we should be looking for vipers. I'm not here to offer you a job as an agent. I'm here to ask you to build something new. A new training directive. Based on your principles. Based on Protocol Jericho. I want you to teach my people how to see the world the way you do. For the first time in years, David stood up straight, the weary slump gone from his shoulders. He looked from the medal, to the money, to the crayon drawing on his fridge. He had sold his past to secure his daughter's future, and in doing so, had redeemed them both. He met the director's gaze, and in his eyes the fire that had been banked to a faint ember now glowed with a renewed, steady light. Welcome back, son, Vance said softly. It's good to have you home.